Can't help but wonder where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Can't help but wonder where I'm bound.
The Dr. Stacy Sims. Welcome to What's the Rush podcast. I am so happy to talk to you.
I'm excited to talk with the Rebecca Rusch.
We have operated in the same circles for, it feels like decades. And this is the first time we're really speaking to each other. It's kind of crazy.
I know, other than in passing, hey, how's it going? Yeah. Oh, all right.
Yeah, exactly. And I just have to say, like, I'm such a super fan and I'm so grateful for all the work and like the grit and determination that you have held throughout your career. It's really
Thanks.
awesome and it's inspired me a ton.
Aw, thanks. Well, it goes both ways. So I can't do it on my own. I have to have other strong women who are pushing it, and you are one of them. So
Well, that's kind of the part. That's why I wanted to talk to you. We have so many similarities in being athletes and being entrepreneurs and being women in mostly male dominated fields and still being here, despite so many challenges and roadblocks and hurdles. So that's why I really wanted to talk to you. And we are sending everyone to your books and your information and your classes. All of that is online and available. And you have this super impressive body of work. And I also know you've got a bunch of new cool things up your sleeve. But we'll send folks to that. And instead, I want to talk to you a little bit about your journey of how you got to where you are and maybe some of the roadblocks that people don't know about because we put on this public face of being an inspiration, being an educator, being a scientist. And sometimes people don't see behind the curtain. So I'd love to go behind the curtain a little bit if you're willing.
yeah, of course. I was like, there's always the persona that everyone knows. And just like you put on this thing to get through stuff, but the real person's behind it. And
Yeah.
so when people see me out, they're like, "Are you Dr. Stacy Sims?" Like, no, I'm Stacy. That's just another entity out there.
Yeah, it is funny. And I'm, part of this podcast, What's the Rush, was really prompted from my long-term 3-year concussion recovery journey that really, really kicked me in the ass and
Yeah.
took me down at the knees and really stripped my identity away
Mhm.
of this hardcore athlete, hard charger. And so this podcast was kind of born from that. And so that is a lot of the discussion of what do we discover when we are taken out at the knees or we slow down or we stop. And
Yeah.
so I want to ask first, what came first? It's like chicken or the egg. What came first, scientist or athlete for you?
Oh gosh, that's hard. Um, Probably a combination. Because when I was a kid, I was always asking why. But then I always wanted to get out riding my bike. And it was primarily, we all have siblings, a drive to get away from my older sister. Because she was more of, I'll stay home and I'll read books or I'll hang out with my friends. And I was the one who's out like building tree forts or like going down to the creek with friends and trying to see if we could catch frogs and like going out and doing stuff and then investigating and asking questions. So the athleticism, I think, stemmed from just wanting to be outside and having adventures. Then as you get older, the why and the athlete kind of just started melding together. Like from high school, really interested in science and biology, but also running cross country and then so they've kind of been hand in hand.
We would have totally been buddies as kids, like playing in the dirt,
Yeah.
getting frogs and climbing trees. We
Yeah.
would have been besties, I think.
Yeah. Jumping out of swings when your parents are like, no, you'll break them out. You're like, I can do it.
I definitely don't, I didn't have a science brain as a young person, but I've really started to develop it. I mean, through my athletic career, the
Mhm.
science of understanding why training works or why rest works.
Yeah.
And then especially through this concussion recovery, really learning more about the brain and the nervous system. And I just listened to a podcast with you with Gabby Reese, and you said something. You were like, I'm all about the brain, and people think you're all about the body, and
Right.
people don't connect the brain and the body. So tell me about your brain interest and how did you make that connection? Because a lot of people, it's only new, I think, that people are making the connection between the brain and the muscles and the body and the gut.
Yeah, I mean, because I started really interested in nutrition and appetite.
Yeah.
And like, I originally wanted to be a chef. And my parents were like, no, you can't. You have to go get a real job. But that interest in how you fuel the body, feed the body, and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. I mean, when we start getting into metabolism, the control center is the hypothalamus, right? So we see temperature control, how you respond to protein, carbohydrate, your menstrual cycle, how you're adapting to heat, how you're adapting to altitude. It all comes from signaling of the brain. And then you have the peripheral, which accepts those signals. So when we start looking at how the body adapts to exercise, how the body adapts to feedback from environment, the main central responses come from brain stimulation. How hot is the blood? How cold is the blood? What kind of hormone signals do we need? Yes, of course, you have the signals coming from the skeletal muscle, but most of it's driven from the hypothalamus. So when we are talking about like all the crazy diets that are out there and things like what's driving obesity or what's driving some of the responses to keto, what's driving some of the responses to fasting. Most people are just looking at what's happening from the skeletal muscle or losing body fat. But I'm like, wait, we have to look at the signalings from the hypothalamus and how that's affecting how our body is going. I'm hungry, I'm full. What's the food noise chatter? What's not? How is this affecting my estrogen, my progesterone, or men, testosterone? So all the things that we're trying to get out of changing diet actually is coming from the brain.
I mean, it seems so obvious, but I also feel like you've pushed against some scientific norms quite a lot.
Yeah.
And you have been talking about women's physiology for decades. And the way, I mean, it seems like only recently, your first book is 10 years old, but it really seems like only recently are people starting to listen and
Yeah.
actually say, oh, yeah, she's right. This is really cutting edge. Why did it take this long for people to listen to your ideas?
I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, I can look from a scientific standpoint where we see in the past 5 or 6 years, there's been more of the global discussion around menstrual cycle and performance.
Mm-hmm.
And people pushing back against that, saying, well, menstrual cycle, the hormone flux is so small, it can't really have an effect. And it's like, well, yeah, actually, if we look at how it affects the whole system and not just, again, the periphery, then we can see symptomology can affect performance. If we're looking at how we can use the menstrual cycle to empower women, or when it goes away, it's a red flag. So we start hearing all of these things around the menstrual cycle, which is great. And we're having global athletes come out and talk about it through the Olympics or tennis or whatever. So I think that was one of the first steps of opening people's minds up to, oh, wait a second, there is this difference that wasn't talked about in sport. Because previously it was all about becoming amenorrheic or losing your period, because then that meant you were more masculine and more like a guy and ready to go. But in fact, we know that that's not healthy, right? And then one of the things that I attribute I shouldn't say positive, but it was a positive that came out of the whole pandemic, is it really highlighted sex differences in medicine and responses to illness. So when we start seeing the difference between vaccination uptake, vaccination side effects versus long COVID, and how we're seeing that women were more affected by long COVID than men. We had a higher death rate in men than women, and we had more side effects in the vaccine in women than men. It made the medical society really sit up and go, whoa, what's going on here? So all the undercurrent of things about medications and even things like breast cancer versus other cancers, you have a higher survival rate in breast cancer because all the research has been done on women. Whereas you look at the other doses of medication in cancer research, it hasn't been that way. So now we're seeing this uptick in trying to educate and have this equality right down to the molecule that's being tested, where you can't just rely on male rat cells. You have to look at other female cells and all that kind of stuff. So it's just been this kind of global mesh that's suddenly come out in the past 5 years, where people are starting to take notice of, hey, yeah, okay, women are different. We're not just a smaller version of the standard male. So we can't generalize.
Yeah, and I mean that's your famous TED talk. Women are not small men, but I get it. There's definitely technology and the internet and everyone at home in COVID have brought certain people and things to the forefront. But you've been in this. You're that curious kid who was playing and looking at frogs, and
Yeah.
you go into science, and you're one of a few women, a handful of women, maybe the only woman in these research rooms and creating this research. What was that like for you as a young, curious scientist who wanted to dive into this?
It was really hard. I mean, like one of the first, I've I've told the story recently to a few people about why I all of a sudden took an interest in specifically about women. It's because when I was in high school and my dad was a colonel in the army, and the first Kuwait War happened, and I had friends, dads that would disappear, and we had army recruiters come, and my dad was like, "Well, what are you thinking about doing?" It's like, "I want to be a SEAL or an Army Ranger," and he's like, "You can't." I was like, "What do you mean I can't?" He goes, "You can't because you're a woman." I was like, "What does that have to do with anything?" And he's like, "Well, women aren't strong enough." And so it was just those like archaic ideas where I was like, "What do you mean? I'm stronger than you." You know? So I started really getting upset with the idea that because of an idea that women are fallible or not as strong, that we couldn't do things that we wanted to do. And in that, I've kind of kept this whole idea of if I'm in a room full of scientists, and I've been in a room full of cardiologists and other like surgeons who say, well, you're not a real scientist because you're a woman and you only have a PhD. Whereas like, well, actually, I'm the kind of person that takes work away from you because I'm the one who's telling women how to take care of their bodies. And so it's always that undercurrent of if you're going to tell me I can't do something, I want to know why. And if it has to do with the fact it's a sex difference, then I'm definitely going to push back. And part of it was growing up in, that whole military patriarchal, I guess, ideology, maybe. I don't know. But seeing the troops and not seeing representation of women, going to a university and seeing just the Vesuvio man and not any kind of representation of women, reading in the textbooks of he or they, but no representation of women. I just got really mad.
Yeah.
So then when I'm in these rooms, it's the same thing. It just like invokes that sense of this isn't fair. And I'm really mad that there isn't justice and equality here. And it's just a deep seed that I guess is a chip on my shoulder, but it still comes out when I'm in these rooms. And people are saying, well, why do you care about women? We don't know enough about men. I was like, because I'm not a dude and I have a daughter and I have a mom and I have a sister and I have an aunt and I have friends who are female. So.
Well, what age were you when your dad asked you and told you you couldn't be a Navy SEAL?
17.
17. It's interesting. There are so many similarities because I also was like, Navy SEALs seemed really cool to me too. And I'm like, why are there no women?
Yeah.
It's changing now.
Yeah.
Which is exciting. But I mean, so you've been pushing since you were 17 years old to have a voice, a woman in predominantly male fields. And how are you not exhausted from this?
Oh, I am.
Okay.
I am. Trust me.
You've been fighting for 4 decades, basically.
Yeah.
To advocate for women and for more scientific research for women.
Yeah. And it is exhausting. And now we're in the age of instant comments and stuff and people pushing back and going, where's the evidence? Where's the research? And it comes down to when I present something as a woman representing women, I get the pushback of where's your referencing? Where's your research? And so I have to put all the references up on any statement that I have. But if I was an Attia or a Huberman or some other male scientist who states something, they never get asked the references. So I just know that that's the norm and that's how it is now. And it is exhausting, but I also think forward. It's like, okay, I've done so much and I see how far we've come since I started this. Mm-hmm. And my daughter, she's 12 and her friends, they're still encountering this. And I fear what's going to happen in the next 4-ish years. But I really don't want to stop because I don't want them to have to relive so much of the stuff that we have. Yeah. I mean, if you even look at, the 90s and the media representation of women and the questions that female athletes would get asked about their outfits versus their performance.
Mm-hmm.
When we're moving it forward now, we're not getting so many of those questions. They're still there, but not so bad. So if I'm like, okay, if we keep pushing and pushing and we can really get into all of the sociocultural and the scientific and be able to merge them, it just makes life better for future generations. So that's the push, really. It's not about me and my friends and my colleagues who are coaches. It's now about our kids. And how do we push forward for our daughters who are now coming into a wider exposure of the world?
Have there been points in your career where you're just like, screw it, I can't push against this brick wall. I'm just going to do something else.
Yeah. And then I go and hide.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, well, what else would I do? I could be a barista and a florist, but I wouldn't want to own a cafe because that seems hard.
Yeah.
And then I think about it, it's like, nope, it's still that little kid who gets mad at things that aren't equal. I can't shake that. So just come back out of hiding and keep going.
Hide. What does that look like for you when you need to go just rejuvenate your own strength by getting hammered and peppered and questioned from the public and like disputed? Where do you go hide and where do you rejuvenate?
I get offline completely. And there's still a few holes in New Zealand where you can't get cell phone service. So I either pretend to be there or I actually go there and I ride my bike.
Where I live, when I step outside the door, there's no cell phone coverage, and I love it so much. And I keep fighting against people wanting to put in cell towers.
Yeah. I am in that point where I don't want my daughter to have a phone. So I'm the mean mom that won't let her have a phone because I know what happens once you get one. And I want to just protect her a little bit longer, even though she doesn't see that. But not being online is fantastic. No cell phone coverage is so refreshing because it's like, I'm sorry, I just can't because you can't reach me.
Yeah, I think it's such an important thing to talk about. I mean, you're an entrepreneur, you're a scientist, you're running your own business, multiple businesses, but yet you're expected to never need a break, to never have to slow down, and never have to take a nap. You know, you're held to this expectation of perfection while being criticized at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. And I mean, I had this conversation I was on a podcast in LA with a friend, and I was like, oh, I wonder what kind of comments I'm going to get about how I look. She goes, what do you mean? It's like every time I do a high-end podcast, someone always remarks that I don't look healthy. Why would they listen to me? And I'm like, well, if they were to live my life and travel 36 hours across the world to get to the podcast and be low sleep and not do Botox, not do fillers, not have makeup on, all of those things, then they would probably look like me too. She starts laughing. She goes, yeah, it's that social media where everyone thinks you have to have filters and be perfect. But what is real life? I'm like, real life is I get up early, I go do something, I get all sweaty, I come back, I have meetings all sweaty. And, I'm lucky to have a shower, get my kid to work, I come home, I do more stuff. And then it's like, take the dog, the kid comes home, get dinner ready, prep the next day. I'm the same as everybody else, but yet on social media and everything, I'm supposed to look and be something different. And I just don't have the energy for that because I'm too busy doing all the things.
Well, you're prioritizing science and research and being a mom and your own physical health, and you're prioritizing things that are important to you. But I mean, that's still going to hurt to hear these comments of people bagging on you on your book or what you're wearing. Like,
yeah, absolutely. So I try not to read comments.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was texting with my podcast producer right before this going, wow, this whole podcast thing, I'm having to take a lot more showers and like wash my hair because same as you, athlete, I'm running around, I put a hat on and call it good. So I've been taking a lot more showers since we've been doing these recordings.
I know.
But yeah, so I mean, how do we shift this standard? You've got to have more research, you've got to have more resources, you've got to work harder, you've got to look better, you've got to be a mom at the same time and the caregiver. Like, how does that actually shift and change? How are we still here?
That's a good question. I mean, you look at it and we're all doing the same thing and we're pushing forward. And I think with the collective voices, with the fact that we are entrepreneurs and we are running our businesses and we are out there and we are setting a new standard and norm for our kids or our kids' friends, right?
Yeah.
And they're seeing that. And it's no longer dad goes to work, mom stays home, and dad does this, dad does that, and mom is just this person that's taking care of us. So we're breaking that mold by the nature of actually doing what we're doing. And it's just a generational thing. You see how
Yeah.
it's changed from our parents to us and how we're changing it from us to our kids or our nieces and nephews and stuff. So it's just taking those steps in time. But I've seen a lot of change over the course of my life, and I'm optimistic that it's going to keep pushing forward.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in with a single mom. My dad died when I was really young in the military, and it was me, my mom, and my sister, and that was it. And she didn't remarry, and so it was like someone's got to shovel the snow and mow the lawn and do the barbecuing and do like
Yeah.
traditional, because and my mom was at work a lot too, so my sister and I really had to fend for ourselves, which it developed a really strong independence, and we didn't have those norms within the family of, oh, girls don't do that. We had this great example from my mother of like she worked in the computer industry and
Awesome.
so she was in definitely in the male's world, and so we didn't grow up in the household with those kind of limitations. But when I went out into the world and being a professional athlete and scrapping for contracts and
Yeah.
it just I was like, oh, the world, like my home life actually felt different than when I went out into the real world. And it
Yep.
was, well, what do you mean women don't do that? Like, I have no choice. I need to get a job. And I want
Right.
to do this and that. And so I actually didn't really experience that until I came out into the world in college and beyond.
And it's so strange to think that that mentality is still there.
Mm-hmm.
People still have that idea that women are delicate flowers and they need to be taken care of and they can't do certain things. And I always am like, wait, it's now 2025 and people are still thinking that way. And it's frustrating.
I like that you said that because it being, we both have public and public images and also our body of work with being strong, independent women and physically, emotionally strong, being, motivating other people. And that really fell away for me the last few years during my concussion recovery. And part of what I had to learn was actually asking for help. And it took me a year and a half to actually admit I needed help and I couldn't just muscle through it and do it alone. And so I actually had to sort of be sort of more fuzzy and needy, and I even like felt uncomfortable even saying that, like, I need help. It feels needy to even talk about the issues I'm having. And that was a real shift for me to actually say, I need help and I can't do this alone. Have
Yeah.
you had that kind of experience where you've had to really just say, can't do it? Like, help. Like,
Yeah. Many times. And I am fortunate enough to be married to someone who is very logical and calm and also does a lot of behind the scenes work for our company. But prior to that, I would just have major breakdowns. I would just like try to go, 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 and then get hit with like severe depression and be down for the count going, I don't know how I'm going to be able to do this. And then find a way to like claw my way back up. I'm very weather affected. So if like winter time stuff, I always am like, I need help. I can't deal with all the gray days and all of the work. And now we have things in play that allow me to keep going on times where I know I'm going to be highly stressed and not be able to get through things. But prior to, and I mean, like with Steve, it's really just been the past about, we've been together for 20 some years. It's probably just been about past 8 years that we've been able to settle into. He knows when I am off the deep end or getting ready to get off the deep end and he pulls me back in. But without him, I don't know how I would be able to do a lot of the stuff that I do right now.
Was it hard for you 8 years ago, or, when you're changing the structure in your relationship and your business? Was it hard for you to say, Steve, I need help? Or did he come in and recognize it and be like, all right, let's change some things here? If you're going to continue being this amazing scientist and getting all this out to the world, you have to change something. Like, was it you or him, or who kind of
It was,
plan?
yeah. So it was actually when we moved back to New Zealand. I never thought we'd move back to New Zealand, but my daughter was 4 and a job came up here and he'd always wanted to move back. And I got the job in the town where he always wanted to live. And I knew the moment I stepped on the plane that it was miserable for me because had just shut down one of my companies, didn't have a lot of money, was still in a bit of postpartum depression, didn't know what was going on, was really upset with leaving. And we land in New Zealand and I'm crying. And for like 3 or 4 months, I was in such a deep depression about where we were, what we were doing, the fact that, I didn't know where I was going to go, what we were going to do with this new job, because it's in a new place. They want to build a new research program. The new dean wasn't that great. So there's so many complications. And it got to a point where I took a lot of pills and ended up in the psych ward. Mm-hmm. And it was that point where he's like, holy fuck, what is going on? I was like, I can't do this. So that was when he's like, okay, now I see what the warning signs are. It's not just that you're angry and tired. It's like there's something seriously wrong here. Wow. So it was a pivotal point where I was just so ingrained in the thought process that things were so bad. The only way it would get better is if I were to remove myself, then Steve and Jera could continue with their life. But when you get to that point and you realize what had happened, where I'd lost all of my social support, I lost the ethos of being because I shut down a company, I changed careers, moved to a new place, wasn't comfortable being a mom, didn't have any support, didn't have any friends, and I'm in a new environment, a new culture that I didn't really want to be in. And it's just all of these things that made him take a pause and go, wait a second. These are a whole bunch of things that I can help kind of unwind and support. So we rebuilt from there.
Wow. So you were suicidal and you were actually trying to end your life.
Yeah.
That's really heavy, Stacey.
Yeah, sorry.
No,
but
here's the thing. Do you think that growth has to come from these really deep, dark places? Like, do we have to get to that point? Because it's the same for me, very similar, not the same, but similar sort of self-sabotaging behavior that nobody really probably would have ever suspected from the outside for someone like you.
Yeah. I mean, because we are expected to put on a front and take everything stoically. The people, I don't think, realize that we are actually human and that all of the stoicism is just really countering the emotional burden that we have as women who are in male dominated industries, who are out there pushing and all the things that we do. And when that stoicism breaks down, I don't think you have to get to the lowest point. I think it's just when a facade breaks and someone realizes what that is and understands that, hey, wait a second, you're like, there's a disconnect here. I've had some friends who have been similar, in a male environment and very stoic, and you could start to see cracks in the facade. And as soon as someone says something, then they realize that there's a safe place.
Yeah.
And I tell my story of how I've had to rebuild. I haven't had it written in any kind of article or anything. And I tell my story in podcasts. I've told it in live events because I want people to realize that you shouldn't be alone. You need a support system. And even if you feel like you have to be so stoic, there is always someone to reach out to talk to. It doesn't have to be a friend. It could be a mental health line. It could be anything.
Yeah.
And by the nature of being human, we're not designed to be alone. And we're not designed to build the burden and hold that burden for everyone else. because we are tribes. I mean, you look at how people have evolved. We've all evolved as a village and as a tribe. And now we're seeing so much isolation and people being so siloed and alone that we're seeing this uptick of mental health crises, especially in young kids. So I'm really trying to push people to understand that, yeah, I've been there and I'm here, but I wouldn't be here without support, without all of these steps in play that allow me to do all of the things and still take a breath every day.
It's so important to tell, and the same with me, because someone looks at somebody who looks physically strong from the outside. They have a body of work of, things that may equate to success. And the outside persona is that if you look physically strong, then you must be mentally strong too, and you must be holding it all together. And that's just not the case. And I hadn't heard that story from you. I'm curious, when you came to in the psych ward and you woke up and you sort of, realized you were still here. What was going on what were you thinking about? And then how long did you stay there? And was there a growth process of like, because you literally had to sit still and think about it and
Yeah.
process it. How was that for you?
I mean, lots of tears, but also maybe a sense of relief
Yeah.
because realizing that I mean, people often say that when you're taking pills or something like that, it's a cry for help. And I didn't think of it as a cry for help. I was like, I just got to get out of here. I want to take a really long, long sleep and not wake up. So when you wake up and you're like, oh, okay, that wasn't long enough sleep, but I'm here. I've got to do something. And the fact of the matter that I ended up there and then, family Steve's coming and checking in and wondering what's going on. And so it was just the reality that hit to actually change and force change and open up conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was a lot of the compartmentalizing that you had to decompartmentalize, where you couldn't put one thing on one side. You had to bring them together. So it was a thought process change. It was also talking to a friend who is a sports psych for High Performance Sport New Zealand and getting different things into play to find triggers, a lot of cognitive behavior therapy. So understanding what the triggers are and what things to put in play before you get to that trigger. Yeah. There's a lot of things from a self perspective that were really difficult, especially when you first wake up and go, okay, well, now what? Here's a bit of relief that I'm still here because now I will be able to see my daughter grow up, and I don't really want to leave my mom and my sister and my husband, but I just didn't know what to do. And now all of a sudden there's all these people that are very interested in, okay, what's going on and how do we help you?
And so I have to imagine 8 years now from that point, you've created a different lifestyle, a different communication process with your husband and your kid, and you've recreated your career. I mean, still scientist, still Dr. Stacy Sims, but in a different way. So, like, what has blossomed from that experience, and how have you changed, you rebuilt? So, how did you rebuild differently?
It was a very not how to put it in. So when I was in the new position here at the Mount with a dean that wasn't so great, and it was like being bullied every day you go to work. I was like, I can't do that. So I was like, F that. I'm done. I don't have time in my life to feel like that every day and feel worthless every day. That was part of the reason why I got so ground down. Yeah. Didn't know what I was going to do. But then Steve was like, you know what? You have this book, and I do some online education stuff in my new job track. So let's put this online and create a course and see how it goes. And that can be our first step out. So it was someone else's oversight that was like, okay, well, you can't keep going and feeling like this every day. Let's try a different tact. And then just being able to then get out of academia again and realize that I could still be able to do research. I would still be able to have PhD students but I didn't have to be under the umbrella of someone who had a hierarchy of an idea or the red tape and pushing people's ideas down or taking other people's ideas, because all of that was just not sitting well with me. And so being able to break away from that and realize the things that I really love to do is to help people. What's the best way to help people? Let's educate them. How do we educate them? We can do courses, we can do calls, we can put out programs, we can do research, disseminate that research. Let's do that. But under my own terms, because mentally I can't take someone bullying me every day, and I can't take the negativity that comes with this every day.
I mean, what a blessing in disguise in a lot of ways, because yeah, going to a job where you feel worthless every day, but then you and Steve being able to take your incredible past and your experience and just like mold it into something that actually is reaching more people now, helping more people, making you feel, more sustained and energized at work. And like, that's pretty great.
Yeah, I know. I'd sit back sometimes. I'm like, I should really have more research articles out there. But then I'm like, if I were to spend more time writing research articles, who would read them? Some people who are doing a lit review? Because I don't think it would have as big of an impact. I don't think that putting out 50 journal articles in a year would have as much of an impact as what we do with courses and education through online stuff.
Well,
Because
it's changed. Medical and people's healthcare has changed where we are now we're being our own advocate because we have to be, because no
right,
one's advocating for us. And
right,
so people are consuming information in such a different way. I mean, it's brilliant. You're on the front end of those kinds of online classes and online learning. Like you were pre-COVID and like
yes,
yeah,
yeah.
visionary. I mean, it really is.
Thanks. I'm just like, let's just get more people to understand, because I'm in this small little room in Mount Maunganui, New Zealand. All the stuff I'm saying is just floating around. But if we push it out there,
It's
then
not just in this room, Stacy. It's floating. It's everywhere, which is so
good.
great. It's
Thanks.
amazing. I mean, you have this mission that I really love because people think of you as this hardcore scientist, hardcore athlete, like really, really brilliant brain. But your mission is purposeful exercise. Is just people. They don't have to be world class. They don't, even though you work with world class people, but you really have this mission to just like have regular people exercise more and like
Yeah.
understand their bodies more. It's
Yeah.
kind of simplistic and beautiful. And
Yeah.
like I
Because
was
that,
wondering, like talking to you, like, oh, she's so smart and there's all this stuff, and but you have normalized things that are really complicated concepts, like your brain and your body and all those things, but you brought them down to like the basic consumption level for somebody who isn't a scientist.
that's my goal.
It's amazing. It's
Oh,
amazing.
thanks.
I mean, I'm aligned in that I'm not a scientist, but I'm in line in that I really do believe if people went outside in nature and exercised a little bit every day, that our world would be a much healthier mentally and physically space.
Right. We wouldn't. I always use the Wally example from the movie. You know, the floating. I don't want that, but I see that as society, so I always bring that up. I'm like, you don't want to be the floating guy who falls down and can't get up and needs robots to help push him back up onto his little floating bed. You want to be the person that has no screen, can get off the floating bed and walk around and say hi to their friends.
Yeah.
Or we can all be in an assisted living facility, but not in the assisted part, in the actual senior living facility when we're 100 years old and having Zimmer frame races. Like,
Yeah.
that's my goal.
Well, I think it doesn't, I've been known as the Queen of Pain. That's been my nickname forever,
Yeah.
which is kind of scary for people.
Yeah.
It's really like trying and doing hard things, but pain becomes this, word for people. And I've actually been trying to shift that into like purposeful play. And like if we
Yeah.
play like we did at recess as kids, if you're in our generation, all this great stuff is happening scientifically and your neurobiology and everything's happening by just playing a game of kickball or climb a tree. But
Right.
as adults, we make it this like checklist item that we have to go do some serious workout and we have to eat this much protein, and like it really isn't that hard. But there's a real barrier against it. I think for people, for a lot of people, even me as a professional athlete, making the shift from my training as my job to
Hmm.
going out and exercising and having fun outside with my friends. Like I've had to make that shift too. Do you
Yeah.
feel like for your work, it's like, it's my job. I have to do this. I have to go lift this much weight and I have to do these many things.
Yeah.
Is it
But
that
now
way
I've
for you?
changed it. Yeah, absolutely. And there are a lot of things that have come up that I haven't been able to do all the things I want to do, like with injuries and moving and that kind of stuff. So now I have it where I want to set a challenge every day and accomplish that challenge. And
Yeah,
could
like
be
what?
a lifting challenge.
Uh-huh.
When we were on the East Coast a week or so ago and got snowed in, the challenge was how fast can I go down this little sledding ramp that we just made in the inner tube? Can I beat my daughter? Can I beat my husband? You know, it's a small little challenge. Could be an internal challenge, but it's all about having fun and moving.
Are they
So
into it with you? Like, do they know that you're racing them on this sledding?
absolutely, yeah. And my daughter's like, get the stopwatch out. I'm going to see how fast we can go, and I'm going to beat you.
Okay, I love that competitive nature that's fun and isn't
Yeah,
like cutthroat, you know.
right. Yeah,
You came from a racing world too, triathlon, which is very cutthroat, very
yeah,
competitive. Elbows out, you know,
yeah.
like
Pushing over people when you're swimming.
right.
Yeah. There was a half Ironman here, kind of as a precursor to Worlds that's coming up. Um, and I watched part of it this weekend, and I was like, I have no desire. Like, I have no desire to be in that world again, and no
Mhm.
desire to like push to limits for a long period of time because it's just not fun. It's like, why would you want to go do a massive ocean swim with all these people, but you actually don't get to see the fish that are under you or go to the rock that's over there? You know, it's like, if I'm going to get in the ocean and do a swim, I want to do it because it's fun and relaxing, not because someone's trying to swim over me and get out first.
Where did that shift come from? Because you were a highly competitive triathlete.
Yeah.
When did that
Um,
shift?
I don't, I think I would just get, I got to a point where I didn't think that I could go any further than where I was.
Hmm.
And looking at the time and effort it took to train to get to a certain level, I was like, there's other things in my life I want to do.
Yeah.
I want to be able to play soccer with Jara. I want to be able to spend more time gravel riding with friends. I want to like be able to do a 100 kilo deadlift, and how am I going to build up to that? You know, so it came out of the challenges, came out of I need something other than just work to be stimulatory.
Yeah.
And the idea of putting on something to train for just got to be too much.
Hmm. Yeah, it does become, I mean, at that level, it is a job. Um,
It is.
you were doing two jobs at once.
Yeah.
Well, what did you take from those competitive years, though? What like good things did you came out of that for you from being a really hardcore, cutthroat, aggressive athlete?
Um, it's part of it's the mentality. And one of the things I told my mom, because she's like, you're always doing something. Like, why are you always out like finding something? Why can't you say no? It's like, here's the thing, Mom. Have you ever watched or if you remember the movie Sliding Doors,
Mhm.
where you get to this point and it's like if you go through one direction and here's this new path of life, or
Yeah.
you don't and you continue on this path of life, but you never know what you might have missed out on. And I don't ever want to miss out on anything. So I'm going to say yes to an opportunity, see where it goes. And if it doesn't work out, I can always come back. But
Mhm.
I don't want to be in that steady state of here's this path. And so I think that's come out of all of the training and the racing and the different places you go and the different people that you meet. It's always there's some other kind of opportunity that comes up through a bike race or a triathlon or something like that. And I've carried that through, and it's kind of the ethos. It's like, well, what if? What if I were to go do this? Oh, it didn't work out. Okay, I'll come back to square one, not square zero, but square one with that education and with that experience to then make another decision to move forward. So it's always that I don't want to miss out on something, but I can always come back to where I am.
You're still that kid who's like super curious and
Yeah.
wants to like do everything all at the same time. I mean,
Yeah.
I've had to temper myself with that and actually not say yes to some things just because of fatigue over
Yeah.
the last few years. How do you balance then, you know, want to be excited, and I love the passion you have for your work, but how do you then not burn yourself out?
I have someone that tells me I'd have to say no.
Okay, and that's your husband.
And a couple of friends
Yeah.
that work with me. They're like, yeah, you can't do this because if you look at your schedule and you're flying here, you're doing this, and then you're doing this, and then you're doing that, you just can't fit that in.
That's great.
Tell them later. Like, come back to me in a few months. If
And
they
do
come back to you in a
you,
few months, maybe you can.
and do you listen to those people and say, okay, yep, you're right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do. Because for me, I want to do everything all the time.
Yeah.
But people on the outside know that that burns me out. And then I get into this. So it's one of those triggers that I was talking about earlier. Like I say, yes, I want to do all the things all the time. And then I get to a point where I'm like, flip. And they don't want me to get to that point. So like, no, you need to pull back. You need to pull back. We don't want you to get to that trigger that's going to put you over the other side. So it's all about that support network, right? Like I was talking about earlier, you can't do it alone. We have the stoicness that people think that we do everything all the time, all by ourselves. But in actuality, you have a support network around you, and it is so important.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely learned that lesson in the last few years. And my business partner, Era, and she kept things running when I couldn't. And the people around me, like, kept this sort of public persona afloat while I was not afloat. And but now we're in a point where you are, where we know the triggers. I've learned so much about my brain and my energy and my body, and that I thought I knew my body as an athlete. But I knew it in a different way. I didn't know my brain really at all, you know?
Yeah. And now you do.
I do. And it's actually been quite a gift to learn about the interconnectedness and the agency that we have to actually heal ourselves with free interventions like breathing, that
Yes.
seem like, oh my gosh, or like sleeping, all this. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That was me yesterday.
yeah.
Like I got all the trouble and all the stress of being overseas and coming back and just trying to hit the ground running. And yesterday I sat down to do work and I just couldn't. So I went and I took an hour nap. I don't ever really nap, but it was at a point where I was like, I actually can't function. I need sleep. And today I'm like, hey, great. Ready to go.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about the sort of, the way that we grew up with certain definitions of like men do this, women do this, and just these like barriers that we lived within. There's also been this barrier of like you just need to work and keep working and keep doing it, and you shouldn't need to take a rest day. But if we think about any athletic performance, rest days are a part of the whole entire performance system. But we don't take that into human performance in your job, in your family life, in just feeling good. We don't take that athlete model, something I call the athlete operating system. That I'm trying to take what I know as an athlete and actually like bring it in to the rest of the world. But nobody wants to take a rest day.
No, they don't. There was a article that was in the paper that the government was mandating everyone take their leave because people were not taking their annual leave. They were just working. Like, well, one, it's a liability because now we have all this extra money that we have to pay out some. But two, we're getting a burnt out workforce. So everyone has to take their annual leave. Right. I think we are still in that mindset where we have to work and overwork. And if we're working and available in after hours, that it's a good thing. Our boss can contact us whenever, and that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. But now there's a shift. And I was like, that is not a good thing. After 6 p.m., I'm not answering emails unless it's like really important because that's off time.
Yeah. It's hard to, with phones and things, it is hard to put those barriers in. We've also gone like, I know for me, I can't be on a computer more than 4 hours a day. Otherwise it hurts my brain and I get headaches and my concussion symptoms start to come back.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, 4 hours, I can't do it. But we often wait till we're broken to actually, or damaged or injured to, as you did, as I did, to sort of learn the parameters of taking care of ourselves.
Yeah. But we have, and we talk about it. So hopefully someone else won't get to that point.
Exactly. So, okay, I want to, I mean, we're coming close on the hour here, but I could talk to you I have like pages and pages of Stacy Sims notes that are really fun. I do think that I've had so much fun researching, but I do think we need to have a bike ride where we talk about all this stuff and just
Yeah.
maybe we record a podcast on a bike ride and have conversations with the wind blowing and everything like that. I do want to go into, this is called What's the Rush? And it is about shedding an armor, shedding an identity, maybe slowing down and taking a look and getting rid of something. Was there something now? I mean, we got your progression. That's amazing. Is there something you're still trying to let go of or slow down or remove?
Yeah, it's the travel for me, being down in the southern hemisphere, and everything I do is in the northern hemisphere, trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
Because it's not a way to have a balanced life. Because if I'm up in the northern hemisphere, I'm living out of a suitcase or a hotel room and going from place to place, seeing friends, doing all sorts of cool stuff. But then I'm away from my family. And then when I come home, I'm so exhausted, I can't show up for my family. And then I've been away for so long that my friends don't even know I'm home. So it's like I don't really, it's a real huge disconnect for balance.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to navigate that and sort that out this year. It's not about giving it up, but it's trying to figure out, okay, well, maybe I'm in the States for this set amount of time. And so everyone knows where I am and what I'm doing for this set amount of time. And then coming home and doing all the things that I couldn't do when I'm away, like have family, have balance, have friends, do behind the scenes work, that kind of stuff. So it's something that has been building up the past few years. And it's now at a point where I can't keep doing it. So I have to find that solution.
Does your family travel with you?
Not all the time, no.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Those are some.
And I go to, yeah. And it's kind of hard too, because like I had the opportunity to go to Paris in the Olympics, and I would have loved for my family to come with me. But you have school, and they're in New Zealand, where even though it's summer in the States, it's school year, winter here. So you can't pull Jara out of school. So it's those kinds of things where it's like, I do all these cool things, but yet I don't share them with anyone. So yeah. Trying to work on it.
That's a big one. And, as you talked about, moving there was a big trigger for, you having a dark spell and a real hard time. So a move anywhere is going to be a really big deal.
Yes and no. Like moving back to the US is going to be hard because I don't actually feel like I belong in the US because I've been out for so many pivotal parts of the cultural nuances now. But yet all of my close friends and family are still there. So it's like I can move certain places and have a pocket of friends and then slot back into the culture that I know and love. But yet it's still going to be different. So it will be hard, but it will be easier than coming all the way across the world, entering somewhere where I don't know anybody and the culture is completely different and I never wanted to come back. So, yeah. Challenges across the board.
Yeah, well, selfishly, I hope you end up close to Idaho so we can do some bike rides together.
Some fun stuff, I know.
And do some fun stuff together and maybe scheme on some collective work things because, like you, my work is intertwined with my life. And when we can combine them, that's actually super fun and super rewarding.
Yeah.
Do you maybe we can cut this if we need to? We'll just pause, but do you have anything really exciting coming up that what's exciting for you right now in your world? What are you most excited about?
I'm actually excited about our new course that we're putting out, Next Gen. And I say that because there's all this conversation about perimenopause and menopause and all the things that are coming up around that. But the other side of it is puberty. And I see my daughter and her friends going through it all, and I understand all the biomechanical changes and body comp changes, but they don't. So trying to educate them or having parents and coaches educated to improve the functionality and ability for girls to understand their bodies early
Yeah.
Because the hope of having body positivity and understanding all the biomechanical changes and why you can't do a pull-up now where you could do it last year because your center of gravity has changed,
Yeah.
to allow them to understand that these are physiological and biomechanical changes. It's not something that they did to themselves. So being able to get that out there is exciting because I am motivated to change the whole girl drop out of sport because of
Yeah.
certain things.
Yeah, and I mean that's huge. You know, in high school, we both got into cross country running. Was I think, our first foray into organized sports, and that was
Yeah.
never discussed. And if you educate these girls at that age now, then when they're our age, they're not going to have all these questions about
Right.
menopause and like what's going on with me and why do I have brain fog. Like they're already going to be so much further ahead than we are. You know,
Yeah.
even with your science background and everything, you know, they're going to be light years ahead of us in just their confidence and understanding of their own body.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
That's what I'm excited about.
that is amazing. What a gift. And I mean, inspired by your daughter, I'm sure, like wanting
Yeah.
to help her and watching her grow up. It's really cool.
And I feel like if you have followed my books and courses, then it's kind of like following my life. First one comes out and it's about, athletic endeavors and training while you're pregnant and all of these kinds of things. And then I get older and have all these questions from my friends, and then we have next level. But now all my friends are having questions about their daughters, and I have questions about my daughter. And I'm like, okay, well, here's all the stuff we know. Let's get it out there so everyone else knows.
Well, we're all a conglomeration of our life experiences. And like
Yeah.
I said, if your work and your life are intertwined and you love them both, then I think that's going to show in what you produce for the world.
Yeah. Very true. Very true.
I'm so glad you are still here, Stacy. And I'm not even going to call you Dr. Stacy because I appreciate the fact that you're Stacy. And I really I admire your work, but even more, I admire how you do your work and how you operate.
Well, thanks.
Yeah,
Back at you.
amazing. And I look forward to that bike ride. Thank you so much for joining me on this new adventure of mine with the What's the Rush podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
It's a long and dusty road and a hot and heavy load. Folks I meet ain't always kind. Some are bad, some are good, some have done the best they could. Some have tried to ease my troubling mind. And I can't help but wonder where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Can't help but wonder where I'm bound.